We start in the 1950s near the California desert. There is a company town called Victory where happy families live an idyllic life. Every morning, the husbands go to work at Victory's headquarters outside town, and the housewife stays home to take care of the house and practice ballet under the supervision of their teacher, Shelley. The wives are not allowed to ask any questions about their husband's work and are forbidden from visiting the headquarters. One of these happy couples is Alice and Jack, who live a very active, intimate life and love throw parties for their neighbors, especially Alice's best friend Bunny and her husband. The couple also have a favorite song that Alice likes to sing whenever she is doing housework. Sometimes the whole town shakes for a few seconds, and Alice tries to ask Jack if it has anything to do with Victory's projects, but he refuses to answer and Alice doesn't mind quickly dropping the subject. One afternoon after ballet, Bunny and Alice watch a group of men in red suits help a new neighbor move in while they talk about the fact that their friend Margaret doesn't go to class, which is no surprise since Margaret has become an outcast in the town after a mysterious incident. Later, Alice is in her garden when she suddenly notices Margaret standing in her backyard holding a toy airplane in her hand with her eyes closed, seemingly seeing a strange vision of a pair of eyes open in the dark. Alice doesn't know what to do with it and ignores it. While making dinner, Alice discovers that all the eggs in her carton are strangely empty, but she forgets about them when her dinner starts burning in the oven. A few days later, Alice attends a pool party at Shelley's house and sings her song when Bunny tells her to stop because she's tired of hearing it. Alice then realizes that she doesn't know the song, but it's always been stuck in her mind. As the music plays in her head, strange images appear before Alice's eyes, but she forgets them again when Bunny distracts her. The party is interrupted for a moment by Shelley and her husband Frank, the CEO of Victory, giving a speech welcoming the new neighbors to town. Suddenly, Margaret interrupts the speech, asking why they are here when they shouldn't be. Her husband takes her away, but now the mood is awkward, so Frank takes over the conversation to remind everyone that they are here because they are changing the world by building a small town based on safety and order. Afterwards, Alice is still worried about Margaret and goes to look for her, only to find her in her house where her husband gives her some kind of medicine. Margaret tries to tell Alice that she is not feeling well, that she has been having bad dreams, and that they are hiding her there, but her husband closes the door to keep Alice away from it. Alice returns to the party and finds Jack in Frank's room fixing his tie. To her surprise, Jack starts being frisky with her right there. Things suddenly get weird again when Frank shows up and starts watching them in a very strange way, but he quickly leaves without saying a word and Alice never tells Jack about it. The next day, Alice and her friends go shopping when the subject of Margaret comes up. They comment on how strange she's been acting since the accident, but Bunny steps in and reminds them that it wasn't an accident. Margaret broke her one rule and took her child deep into the desert because she saw something, possibly a hallucination. When they find her, she is alone with her son's toy plane and they never find the child, although Margaret swears that they took him away from her as punishment. The conversation is abruptly interrupted when the ground shakes again, but the women do not react as they usually do. One of them asks if the rumors about the men developing weapons are true, but an angry rabbit interrupts her conversation, reminding her that wives' only job is to support their husbands, not ask questions. Later that night, Alice begins having very strange dreams, and she can't stop thinking about them the next day. She decides she needs some fresh air and gets on the bus, but instead of getting off at the mall, she stays so she can enjoy the view of the desert, which the driver finds very strange. Suddenly, a plane resembling Margaret's toy appears in the sky and falls until it crashes in the middle of the desert. A plane has never flown over this area before and Alice wants to check it out, especially since they might need help, but the bus driver refuses to take her there because it is against the rules. Alice breaks the rules anyway and walks deeper into the desert until she finally comes across a hill surrounded by a spiral path. Alice works her way up to the top until she finds a mysterious dome and starts calling for help, but no one answers. Alice is scared but still wants answers, so she slowly approaches the dome until she finally dares to put her hands on the glass walls. This movement suddenly jolts her body and causes her to throw her head back as a series of strange and disturbing images appear in her eyes and Frank's voice continues to talk about leaving a mess behind. When Alice is finally able to blink again, she finds herself on her bed at home. Confused and frightened, Alice goes to the kitchen where she discovers Jack trying to cook because he didn't want to wake her up. It turns out that Alice had already returned when Jack got home, but she doesn't remember how. She mentions the plane crash only to hear Jack say that there wasn't an accident, otherwise everyone in town would be talking about it. Alice gets upset and blames it on bad dreams, and Jack distracts her with some comforting touches and jokes about cooking. The next day, Alice is cleaning her windows as usual when the wall behind her suddenly starts moving, pressing her against the glass. Terrified, Alice tries to push it back, but in the blink of an eye, the wall snaps back into place as if it had all been a hallucination. At that moment, the phone rings and Alice picks up the receiver to hear Margaret asking her if she saw him. She points out that they are both lying and should leave, but Alice can't take it anymore and reminds her friend that she is not crazy before hanging up the phone. However, the conversation never leaves Alice's mind, and during her next ballet lesson, she is shocked to see her reflection transform into Margaret. At first, Margaret mimics Alice's every move, but suddenly she places her hands on the glass and starts banging her head, causing Alice to scream in panic. No one else in the room knows what she is reacting to, and when Alice turns around, Margaret has disappeared, concerned about the meaning behind this. Alice rushes home and finds Margaret standing on the roof of her house. Alice screams at her as she cries, trying to stop her, but Margaret ignores her and ends it. Alice panics again and tries to reach Margaret, but she can barely take 2 steps before the men in red appear and drag her away. That evening, Alice tries to tell Jack what happened, but Jack doesn't believe her because Margaret's husband is with her in the hospital and told everyone that she was fine. It was just an accident while she was cleaning the windows. She hates being treated like she's crazy and demands to know the truth, asking Jack about his job and what the company is hiding from everyone until he finally loses his temper. He yells at her to remind her that answering these questions could mean losing their wonderful life together and tells her to drop the subject before he leaves her alone for the night. Alice is anxious to go back to sleep, so she tries to distract herself by watching some TV, which leads to another hallucination where she finds herself drowning in a swimming pool. It seems very similar to the way the wall trapped her, but before she can process the meaning, she closes her eyes and finds herself standing at the window as if trying to leave. The next morning, Alice is wrapping up the leftovers of dinner and is not really coherent when her hands move on their own and wrap apart her body. Alice snaps out of this a few seconds later and removes the wrap, taking a deep breath as she finally accepts that she has lost her mind. Moments later, Jack brings in Dr. Collins for an examination. The doctor determines that this must be due to stress from the trauma of seeing Margaret fall, and when Alice tries to explain what really happened, Collins says that the mind can sometimes alter reality because it is overwhelmed with grief. He also tries to prescribe some medication, but Jack and Alice refuse to take it, promising that she does not need it. At that moment, Alice notices that Collins is carrying confidential files on Margaret in his bag, prompting her to ask what happened to her. Collins explains that Margaret suffered from fits of rage and madness which did not allow her husband to do his work in peace, so he was fired from Victory and Margaret was sent elsewhere to get the help she needed. Collins then leaves the house, accidentally forgetting his bag. Once he and Jack are out, Alice jumps on a briefcase to look for clues, but is interrupted by Collins' return when he realizes what he forgot. Alice pretends to pick up the briefcase to hand it to him, and thankfully everyone believes her. Once Collins leaves for good, it is revealed that Alice stole Margaret's files, but all the pages were blacked out. Since the files are useless, Margaret burns them in the fireplace while thinking of Margaret and drinking whiskey to drown out her guilt. She is still drinking moments later when she takes a shower and her mind starts to drift, causing her to see all those disturbing images again. Although this time she can also see the beautiful moments of the couple cuddling, she is suddenly brought out of her stupor when Jack comes home and plays some music, and while Alice is still in shock, Jack comes to see her and asks her out of nowhere if they should have a baby. Alice promises to think about it. Later that evening, the two attend a lavish party hosted by Frank at a restaurant, who keeps watching her as she discusses things with Collins in the corner. This puts Alice on edge, and she begins to break down when a dancer appears in a room to perform, reminding Alice of her visions. As the tears begin to fall, Alice asks Jack to walk her home, but Jack ignores her because Frank is going on stage to announce a big event. To everyone's surprise, Frank calls Jack to join him and announces that he got a promotion. Everyone starts celebrating, but that's the last straw that causes Alice to completely break down, and she runs to the bathroom, where she sees the vision of the couple again. Bunny suddenly shows up to check on her and Alice tries to explain everything, but Bunny interrupts and scolds her for breaking the rules. She thinks that Alice is acting like a woman and trying to ruin her husband's big night, so she needs to pull herself together and be a good wife. Alice has no choice but to go back to her routine and try to forget everything. A few days later, Jack hosts a dinner party at his house, which Frank and Shelley also attend. While Alice is busy cooking, Frank approaches her to tell her that she loves him. He has always wanted someone to challenge him because great men can only change history if they are pushed, so he hopes that Alice will continue to push her in the future. During dinner, Alice decides to sit at the head of the table instead of letting Jack sit because she wants to look directly at Frank while she eats. As the usual chatter begins, Alice interrupts the guests to ask them about their lives before coming to this town and points out how the same few stories are repeated by all the neighbors. They are asked to remember these stories because she wants them to forget the real ones, like what happened to Margaret. Jack tries to stop Alice, but Frank tells her to continue, prompting Alice to rant about everything she has seen and how Frank lies to everyone to perfect his little world. Frank keeps a straight face and tells everyone that Alice suffers from the same psychosis as Margaret, even accusing her of being in his bedroom. Everyone is extremely uncomfortable and Shelley explodes, accusing Alice of causing chaos and insulting her husband before standing up and leaving. All the other guests follow her, and while Jack goes to open the door, Frank stays behind to tell Alice that he expects more from her before he leaves as well. Alice is left fuming and explodes again when Jack returns and accuses her of trying to ruin his big night. She immediately comes to him and swears that this was not the case, that Jack is more important to her than this life in Victory, and that they should leave this place before it destroys their relationship. After hearing much pleading, Jack finally gives in and agrees to run away together. Alice wastes no time and rushes to pack the simple necessities before joining Jack in the car, who shocks her when he suddenly apologizes. Alice does not understand what is happening until the men in red show up to drag her away, and Jack begins to cry when he hears his wife screaming for help. Alice is taken to the hospital to receive electroshock therapy. As her entire body aches, she begins to have those visions of the couple again, and discovers that she and Jack are living in the modern era and singing that disturbing song. Jack has lost his job, but Alice says that is okay because she can work another shift at the hospital, where she is a doctor. The double shifts start to take their toll on Alice, and when she arrives home late, Jack doesn't help her mood by failing to make dinner and having the audacity to insult her when Alice is too tired to care for him. Jack eventually spends the night listening to Frank's podcast promoting a way for men to find their true selves away from the society that stifles them. A while later, Alice wakes up in a hospital. Collins announces that she has been cured, so Alice is sent back to the city, where she begins to live her old routine again as if nothing had happened. The days pass uneventfully until Jack comes home from work one evening and sings that annoying song again. This time, Alice is able to remember the lyrics, and this triggers the memory of being dragged across a floor she can't recognize. It turns out that the Jack she sees in her visions is real, and has applied to join Project Victory, where he can choose the perfect life. This has given him access to a special machine he keeps at home, and Alice is connected to it 24/7 as her life in Victory is a simulation. This applies to all the wives there, and like the other men, Jack is only connected to this machine for a few hours each day, disconnecting when he enters the headquarters in the desert. The rest of the time, he is responsible for keeping Alice's real body well, and must work a simple job to pay for the machine. After returning to Victory, Alice falls to the ground in pain, overwhelmed by the images that just flooded her mind. She demands an explanation from Jack, who immediately gets defensive and screams that he did it so they could have a perfect life because they were miserable. Alice still thinks he was being an idiot for taking away her independence and trying to convince her that she is crazy. She is also worried about the other wives and children, but Jack immediately explains to her that the children are not real, they are part of the simulation as well. Jack then falls to his knees to beg for forgiveness while hugging Alice, making it hard for her to breathe. Alice, fed up with her husband's lies, grabs a glass and uses it to beat Jack until he faints. What she doesn't know is that dying in Victory also kills you in real life, and while the real Jack closes his eyes, Frank receives a call telling him what happened. At that moment, Bunny enters the house because she heard some noise and immediately covers Jack's body before trying to calm Alice down. Alice tries to explain everything and Bunny admits that she already knows, and she chose the simulation because it's the only way she could get her children back after they died in real life. She also explains that Alice needs to go to headquarters and disconnect herself because Jack can no longer do that for her in the real machine. Alice is scared but does as Bunny asks her to, and she finds all the neighbors coming out as well. When all the street lights start to explode, the women start to notice that something is wrong, but the men focus on asking about Jack and trying to stop Alice. Bunny gets out to push the men away, giving Alice the opportunity to get into a car and drive off in time before the men and Red arrive, stealing cars to chase her down. A chase ensues through the streets, and while Alice manages to get out of the city without a hitch, things get complicated in the desert when the men and Red start hitting her car with their cars. Dr. Collins also arrives in his own car and rushes to help her, but when Alice finds herself trapped, the car quickly drives off the road, causing Collins and the others to crash into each other. Frank receives the news of Collins' death at home via a loudspeaker call, so Shelley hears what is happening as well. While Frank is busy giving orders, Shelley approaches him and stabs him, claiming that it is her turn now. In the desert, Alice continues driving until she finds a hill and takes the road by car, but the car breaks down at a bad turn. Still not ready to give up, Alice gets out of the car and starts running, believing that the car blocking the road is enough to stop the others. Unfortunately, the men in Red also leave their cars and start climbing the hill to try to catch up with her, so Alice has to push her body to the limit in order to run all the way to the top. When she reaches the dome, Alice imagines Jack hugging her and telling her to stay as she remembers their time together in real life. At that moment, the men and Reed appear behind her, reminding her of what she must do. Alice runs to the wall and puts her hands on the glass, throwing her head back as disturbing images mixed with some of her real memories come back to her. Suddenly, everything goes black and Alice is stunned and the movie ends here.